In this video, we're going to start our discussion of unemployment. We're going to look at the general definition and talk about some different types of unemployment. So first of all, not everybody is going to be counted as officially unemployed by the government or economists. But not all people who want to work have a job. People who are actively looking for work may be considered unemployed, but not everybody who wants a job is considered unemployed by the government. So the definition of unemployment is not just somebody who wants to work. First, it has to be somebody who is of working age, so 16 years or older. They have to actually want a job, willing and available to take a job, and they need to be actively looking for work in the last 4 weeks. When we're calculating the unemployment rate, so if you hear unemployment's at 5% or 10%, that's not talking about the percentage of the total population that doesn't have a job. What it's looking at is the number of people who are unemployed divided by the people in the labor force. And the labor force is going to include unemployed people plus employed people. And in this case, the unemployed people are only those who are actively looking for work. So the unemployment rate is trying to gauge in the current labor market what percentage of people are unable to find a job. This number is going to be seasonally adjusted. There are some jobs that only happen for part of the year. Most unemployment rates don't include people who are seasonally unemployed. So maybe you work as a mall Santa, you only have a job in the end of November through December. You're going to have that same job again next year in November and December, but January through October, you're unemployed. Or farm workers, they may only be employed for 3 to 6 months out of the year while there's lots of active work to be doing on the farm. And then during the down season, they're unemployed, but they'll go back to that same job the next year. Cyclical unemployment has to do with the business cycle, which is why it's called cyclical, business cycle. Generally, cyclical unemployment happens during the recession phase of a business cycle. So there's some extra high level of unemployment happening in the economy just because we have an economic downturn. Not because we don't need those jobs, not because we really have a lower demand for production or for products, but because all GDP is lower in the economy at that time. It's due to the lower supply or demand from a shrinking economy. Cyclical unemployment is considered temporary. It's something that we expect to end when the recession is over. So maybe some restaurant workers are laid off during the recession because people aren't going out to eat as much. When the recession is over, people have money again, they start going back to restaurants. The assumption is that those workers will be hired back at the restaurants as now there's a higher demand for the products. Cyclical unemployment, or during recession, we assume that the economy is producing below potential GDP, so somewhere inside our production possibility curve. So this is going to be some sort of temporary unemployment. As the economy recovers, we assume that we're going to get back up to that potential level of GDP. So cyclical unemployment means our economy is being inefficient, we're not using all available resources, there are people who want to work, there are people who want to buy stuff, but because we have a recession, there's not enough jobs or products available. Generally, government policies will do things to try to stimulate the economy, meaning get us out of a recession faster. They're trying to eliminate cyclical unemployment. We're going to discuss how effective this is in a later chapter when we talk about fiscal policy. But the idea is that the government doesn't really want the economy producing below potential GDP, and so they do things to intervene in markets to get us out of a recession to end cyclical unemployment. There are 2 other types of unemployment that are always present, even when we're producing on our production possibility curve, when we're producing at an efficient level of production. The first is called structural unemployment. This is where the skills of workers don't match the skills required by the producers. So we'd say structural unemployment is a skill mismatch. The types of things that jobs require are not skills that current employees or people seeking work have. Mismatch in skills can happen for several different reasons. The first is creative destruction. Creative destruction is a process where a new invention or a new innovation destroys an old predominant industry. For example, before the electric or gas automobile was invented, people generally walked, or they rode around on a horse, or they had a horse-drawn carriage. Nearly a quarter of all agricultural land in the United States was devoted to producing food for horses. There were people whose entire jobs revolved around taking care of horses, horseshoes, shoveling manure, right? Feeding horses, because that was our main mode of transportation in the United States. When the automobile was invented and that industry took over, it was great, but not for everyone. If your family had a long history working in a horse industry, making horseshoes, growing food for horses, now all of a sudden everybody's driving cars, you are now structurally unemployed because your skills for creating horseshoes no longer match what employers are requiring. Now they're not hiring horseshoe makers. They're hiring people who can assemble cars, people who can work on a factory production line, people who can repair cars. And so now structurally unemployed workers need to learn some new skills so that they're able to go into jobs that are currently demanded in the market. Sometimes we have an improved technology that reduces the amount of labor that it actually takes to produce something. So maybe we need computer software engineers, but because of better technology, we only need 8 software engineers instead of 10. So those extra 2 people now have structural unemployment. They have a mismatch of skills because there's too many people essentially employed or looking for work in that particular industry. It can also happen because of depreciation of human capital. Over time, your skills wear out. You need to be continually working at them and using them and training with them to keep them up. Think about something that you learned 5 or 10 years ago that you have never gone back to. If you had to take a test on it right now, even if it was something that you mastered in the past, you probably wouldn't remember a lot of it right now. Or even if you think about this class, maybe on the first or second exam, you get a really high score. But in 2 years from now, if I came back and gave you that same test without studying and retraining yourself on those things, you're probably not going to get the same score, right? You may actually do very poorly on the test. Your human capital, your skills, your knowledge, it wears out over time. Things that you continually practice, things that you do every day that you build upon, that stuff doesn't go away. So if you want to remember economics forever, just study a little bit every day for the rest of your life. Sometimes it's a geographical mismatch. So it could be that you have skills that are relevant in the current modern workforce, but just not in the area that you live. Some industries are heavily concentrated in certain geographical areas. In Detroit, for instance, there's a lot of car manufacturing. If you want to work in the car manufacturing industry, maybe you move to Detroit. If you live in a state or an area that doesn't have any car plants, it's not going to be helpful that you have those skills. So you may be structurally unemployed because your skills do not match the jobs in the current area in which you live. There will always be some structural unemployment. So this is not something that goes away after a recession ends. It's not caused by a recession. It's caused by changes in the production process, changes in the types of products we're making, improvements in technology, the wearing out of human skills. So it's always going to be there. Sometimes government programs will step in and try to target certain areas of structural unemployment, especially if there's something with creative destruction, a very huge prominent industry gets wiped out. The government may supply training programs or some sort of relief for people in those affected industries. But structural employment is never going to be zero. The third type of unemployment is frictional unemployment. This is something that's always going to be present in the economy as well, whether or not we're in a recession or a time of growth. Frictional unemployment results from a time delay from when you start a job search to when you become employed. Frictional unemployment can be short or it can be long. Maybe you start applying for jobs and it only takes a week or two to get hired and start working. Frictional unemployment can be longer. You may start applying now. It may be 6 months or a year or 2 years before you find a job. It just refers to the amount of time that it takes from starting your job search to actually becoming employed. It's going to take time for workers and employers to find each other. So the frictional side happens from the company's side as well. They put out a job application, job request. Maybe they get 10 applications, maybe they get 100, but they have to find the right candidate, the person with the right skills, the right personality to fit the job. And it could take them a long time to go through that hiring process to find the right person. In jobs that have very specialized labor, really technical skills, things that not a lot of people can do, probably going to have a longer duration of frictional unemployment. It's going to take a longer time for workers and employers to find each other. Frictional unemployment is temporary. It's something that's going to end as soon as workers and employers are matched up, as soon as they find each other. So you're unemployed because it's just going to take you time to find a job, not because your skills don't match or not because there's no jobs available. So this is temporary. It could be very short, it could be long, it just depends. Every industry is different. Government policies can't eliminate frictional unemployment. There's not a whole lot the government can do to make it workers and jobs find each other faster. Sometimes they might try, depending on the type of industry and maybe what's causing the frictional unemployment. The government can work on reducing information costs through sponsored job sites or other programs to try to connect workers with jobs. They may do this especially in an industry where there's a technological mismatch. Maybe workers don't have the technical skills to be able to search for the jobs or find them. Government can potentially intervene there. But generally, there's not much they can do to eliminate frictional unemployment. So in our markets, we're always going to have frictional and structural unemployment. And during a recession, during an economic downturn, we'll also have cyclical unemployment. Full employment, or the natural rate of unemployment, happens when the economy is producing at its full potential. When we're producing on an efficient point on our production possibility curve. Full employment means there's no cyclical unemployment. GDP is at its full potential. We're still always going to have structural and frictional unemployment. So full employment does not mean 0% unemployment. It does not mean that everybody has a job who wants to work. In the United States, full employment means around 4% unemployment rate, maybe 4 to 6%. This can change over time depending on how structural and frictional unemployment rates change. Full employment does not mean everybody has a job who wants to work. It does not mean there is 0% unemployment. So full employment just means we're producing at our full potential. We're on that production possibility curve. The rate changes over time. Generally, if we're around 4%, we would say that the U.S. is at full employment. Unemployment is not equally distributed. So you may hear unemployment rates reported in the news. 5% unemployment, 8% unemployment, 1% unemployment. That does not mean that that is distributed evenly among all demographics. Occupation, age, race, and ethnicity, all of those things may affect the unemployment rate. Occupation, so different jobs have different unemployment rates. Some industries are hit a lot harder than others. Age, certain ages may get laid off first and rehired last. When we have cyclical unemployment, sometimes younger workers are fired first. And then as the economy starts to recover, they may be hired back last. When we look at statistics by race and ethnicity, by gender, we see that it's not equal across the board. Some people or some groups are more impacted by unemployment. They may have higher unemployment rates, both during a recession and during times of economic growth. During a recession, the lowest skilled jobs and the lowest skilled workers are usually laid off first and rehired last. When a recession hits, say we have a restaurant, they have to lay off or fire 3 of their 10 employees. They're going to pick the 3 lowest skilled employees, the people who produce the least amount of stuff. Those people are going to be laid off first. Then as the economy starts to recover, they may be hired back last as well. Because during the recovery phase, we don't just jump up right back to those pre-recession levels. It takes time. It takes time to get back there. And so often unemployment increases income inequality. It has low-income households staying low income and suffering from recessions longer than the rest of the country. Sometimes firms change their production process to be less labor-intensive during recessions. And so maybe you were cyclically unemployed during the recession, but your company changed the way they produce things, the recession is over, and now you're structurally unemployed. Unemployment doesn't have equal burdens. It depends on the type of unemployment, depends on the location, your occupation, age, all sorts of demographics. This will be the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to look at the unemployment rate. We're going to look at how to calculate it and discuss a little bit more about unemployment statistics.